I'm Robin Scully, our Art Program Director of Perspective Gallery, and welcome to Art Hike. Today we're going to be exploring the woods around the place that I live, and I want to start out by talking about this really old maple tree right here, a 150-year-old tree. And it's on its last days, but the bones of the tree are gorgeous. In other words, the trunk and the branches. And I want to encourage you to notice things like this when you're on your hike, so that perhaps this would be a really awesome thing for you to draw. I don't know what we're going to end up by drawing today, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I drew last time, what I've been drawing over the past couple of weeks, and then we'll sit down and maybe find a nice place to settle down and do some art today. Also, I would like to go through what I bring in my art bag. So when you're on your art hike, one of the things you need to do is have some easy to carry art supplies with you. And everybody has their own things that they like. I'm going to tell you what I like today. I have this little mesh bag that I always keep things in. I have a portable set of watercolors that have a nice supply of basic colors that you can cross mix easily in the lid. I'll talk to you a little bit about the brush that I use when I'm using watercolors. And another wonderful supply to have with you when you're hiking are, even though this is big and heavy, you can take them out and put them in a different container if you'd like. Watercolor pencils, or colored pencils, are really neat because you can draw with them like regular pencils and you have all this control, and then afterwards you can paint what you drew, and so you have the opportunity to do watercolor like drawings. And I have an example of one of those that I did last week or last month when I did Art Hike, when I was doing What Color is Bark. The supplies in my little art bag here, I love these little Pilot V5 pens. They're great. They don't fade when they over time, so they're a nice pen to use. I don't know if they're considered archival, but really, you know, how long do we need things to last, right? I usually have a couple brushes in here that are not filled with water, and then I have this awesome water-filled brush, which you can buy at most art supply stores or online. But there's water inside of this reservoir, and you just squeeze it and it comes out, so your brush stays wet while you're on your hike. And you don't have to carry water with you. So I really like having a brush like that. You have to be careful that you don't screw it on too tight though, because if you remember last time, I couldn't get it off. The other very important thing to have with you, especially if you're using watercolor pencils, is a pencil sharpener, so that you can sharpen your pencils as you're working. And I have erasers, but I didn't even bring a pencil. I don't do very much with pencil these days, but if you're a person who enjoys drawing with pencil, you should go for that. So anyway, let's see, do I have my pen still in there, or did I drop that somewhere? I don't know. Oh, there it is. I did drop it. So because I'm always losing that, I'm going to hook that right there on the corner of my bag. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about paper, because everybody has something that they like and don't like when it comes to paper. And particularly whether it's smooth or rough, and also the shape. I really respond to square shapes, and I enjoy working on square watercolor pads. This is the drawing that I did last time with What Color is Bark. It evolved into something way different than bark. But when I worked with this, I was working with the watercolor pencils, and you can see where it's more textured, that the rough paper picked up the quality of the texture with the colors. And then I used water on places that I wanted to paint with. And so what you see here is a combination of drawing and painting. And if you flip this paper over, it's very smooth on the back. So if you don't like a rough texture, oftentimes you'll find that with these watercolor pads, the back will be smoother than the front. And so that's a choice you can have when you're working with papers, whether you want a bumpy, more textured surface, or whether you want something smooth. When you're buying paper, also, cold press paper, cold press finish, means that it's a bumpy paper. I don't have an example of hot press here, I don't think, but hot press watercolor paper is smooth. And so when you are trying to decide what kind of paper to get, those are some little details that might help you to decide whether you want, and a lot of times it's a visceral thing. You just kind of pick up the paper and you feel it and you go, ooh, I don't like that, or ooh, I love that. And so when you're actually working on your drawing, that's going to make a really big difference for your overall response to what you're doing. So it's a whole person experience. Also, I have a bunch of little scrap watercolor paper. So I just have these, I don't know what they are. They look like 5x8. And I love these. I just keep them stacked up on my desk and I do little drawings. I just take a walk out. But this was one I did a couple weeks ago and I've been working on it for about 2 weeks. I did the drawing, but I also had a photograph that I could refer to, which was good for me in the sense that I could, when I wasn't exactly sure what was happening, I could go, oh yeah, there was moss there, so I'm going to put some moss there. But ultimately it turned out to be my drawing, and I'm still working on this a little bit. I'm going to create a little more contrast in here with ink. More than likely today on our art hike, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a sheet of blank paper and I'm going to go ahead and do a drawing of something that I find in the woods. So I'm going to put that on top, I'm going to clip it, and I'm going to put it back in my bag, and let's go for our little walk today. For our little walk in the woods. This time of the year, the wineberry bushes or vines are producing their fruit. So I'm going to keep my eye out for a wineberry that's ripe so we can possibly have a little snack along the trail. Oh, there's some right here. These are also known as jewelberries because they are jewel-like in their beauty. And they taste really, really good too. So there's a lot of wineberries on this part of the trail that are just starting to ripen. And I don't think I'll be able to draw them because I eat them raw. You can see along the trail that there are May apples that are fruiting. Their leaves are gone. But they have this great fruit that when it turns yellow, you can eat them. Make jelly out of them. But we never get to do that because the squirrels always get them before they turn yellow. You do not want to eat them before they turn yellow though, because they have oxalic acid in them, which will not make you feel very well to eat them. Earlier in the fall or in the spring, all of the woods were covered with these little umbrella-like plants. So the top leaves die on them and then the fruits get really big. You can see a lot of them through here. The nice thing about taking an art hike in the summer is that it's a great place to come and stay cool when it's hot everywhere else. And there are more bugs than most people have in their houses there. And oh, I see something I might want to draw. So these big spikes right here are flowers from, they stand out. They're really kind of beautiful. Everything else is low and green, and then you have these spires of white flowers. This is a black cohosh plant, which is actually a medicinal herb. It's a traditional Appalachian medicinal plant. We use the roots for it. And this time of the year you can walk through the forest in a lot of places and you'll see these spikes sticking up all over the place. And I feel happy. I have several of them, but not the deer. Oftentimes will eat the spikes off of them. That's one there. There's several in the back, but I think I might just sit down here next to the poison ivy. Always seems to be poison ivy wherever I want to draw, so watch out for that. I know in some of my other projects I've talked about it a lot, but it's leaves of 3, let it be. You don't know. This one's poison ivy right here. That's not, that's actually, and that's blackberry bramble. So it's, but if you don't know, you stay away from it, right? So, poison ivy is kind of shiny, but this one isn't even shiny anymore. But you know, I get it really badly, so I know where it is. All right, so I'm gonna just kind of plop down here, I think, because I think my effort is going to be on trying to create a drawing with pen and ink on one of those pieces of paper I showed you earlier that really shows how this plant is sticking its flowers up above everything else in the woods, which is making it very attractive to insects to pollinate it. There's a lot of competition going on right now in the woods for plants getting pollinators, so this is what this plant is doing to get the bees' attention. It's going, hey, we're out here. And so I'm just going to take out my white paper, and I like to have clips on them because that way when I drop things I only drop them in smaller amounts. And I'm just going to simply use this little pen that I was talking to you about earlier. And I think, you know, looking at a scene like this is like totally overwhelming. Hi there, Bramble. It's kind of like where do I start? And so that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. A little bit is where to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the focal point that I was interested in, and that's these big spires right here. So looking at a blank sheet of paper, I think thinking about how I'm going to compose this, I'm going to do a vertical drawing, and I'm going to start off by putting the spires in there, and then I'm going to just start going in and putting all this little green stuff in, or LGS as we like to affectionately call it. And I put little green stuff all over it, just using my pen. And I might go into it with colored pencil eventually, but as I sit here and quietly contemplate the space I'm in and settle in, that's a really important part of it, is that you feel comfortable with where you're sitting and take a deep breath and pay attention to your breathing, and also the other sensory perceptions that are happening around you, what it sounds like, what it smells like. And I do wish the lawnmower wasn't going in the background, but oh well. Some people might like to start in pencil, but I'm not as worried about what it looks like when I'm done as the fact that I'm enjoying what I'm looking at now and that I'm connecting with it through drawing. Sort of just lay out my focal points. I'm not really going to be teaching you how to draw with these lessons. I'm mainly talking about how to sit down and be present in the space that you're in and focus on details that you may just pass by in a normally busy day. Um, this fall we're going to be doing some deep dive art lessons with the gallery, Perspective Gallery. So pay attention to our Facebook marketing, and you can sign up for those, and we'll let you know in August when those are going to be happening. So hopefully we'll see some folks around then. I like to start out by just kind of getting a simple line drawing in, just so that I can go back in later when I feel like I want to just sort of go in and do a little dip into drawing. A lot of my drawings I like starting off with an idea and then having an opportunity to just do an imaginative kind of drawing later on. I did this one. I started this one actually on a moony night at my house, and then this one actually sitting in the woods, but then went back in later and did all of the scratchy background. So it's not that you have to get all the details in right away, just like last time with the bark drawing. You can get an idea started that can be the basis for your later contemplative types of drawing too. So you can, and it's a great way to kind of revisit a place when you might be in a stressed situation. You might be able to pull that drawing out and then remember how it felt when you were sitting here calmly drawing. So having this next to you at your desk, for instance, and then perhaps you need a 5-minute mental relaxation break. If you're not somebody's into meditation or doing other kinds of things, this is a really great way to keep yourself kinetically connected to relaxation, because some of us need to be moving to relax. So getting this imprint of your moment in time on a piece of paper will allow you to revisit your calmness in a time when you may be a little stressed out. As I was talking about earlier, there's just so much LGS, little green stuff here. So what do? So I kind of create my own visual shorthand rather than having to go in and do all the detail. Now you may be the kind of person who loves detail and you want to spend 50 hours doing your drawing, which is totally fine. I really am a big picture kind of person, so I have this feeling that I'm trying to create. So what I do is I create visual shorthand and I do some scribbling, and I create some of my own kind of line making that mimics what I'm looking at. And I also squint a lot so that I get rid of a lot of the detail, so I'm not overwhelmed by every little line on every little leaf, and I will just refer to that occasionally in some of my drawings. But then another big thing I'm working on is contrast, and I can use contrast, the difference between light and dark or variations in texture, to create the differences between the negative and positive space, or the objects themselves and the objects around the things that I'm looking at. So those changes in my drawing can allow it to start popping a little bit. And it takes a lot of this kind of scribbly work to make that happen, but this is the part that for me is really relaxing, because I'm really piecing it together kind of like a puzzle, taking each little section and going, oh, well, this needs to stand out. This leaf here needs to stand out more. So I'm just going to make it darker in here. And then, oh, I see a little stem coming in here that I could differentiate out. So I'm going to put that there, but then I'm going to darken it next to it. But I'm not really saying I'm drawing the leaf of this Solomon seal, for instance, because there's a lot of that plant in here. I'm going to refer to the Solomon seal by making a line for the central stem, and then putting the alternate leaves in there like that. But I'm not necessarily going to put so much detail in it somebody's going to look at that and go, oh, that's a Solomon seal. But there are inspirations for me. So really that's what you're doing, is you're being inspired by all of this stuff, but not having to put it all in there. And a lot of it later on you can go back in, as I said, and you can put the details in even more. Like, I'm not going to put all of the background in the woods. I'm going to create this kind of scribbled dark background around the edges, and then I'm going to gradually lighten it as I get closer to these flowers so that they don't blend into the textural background that I'm creating too much. And I want them to almost seem otherworldly, like they're glowing here, that they're standing up in front of the world, and that those are the all-important things right now. And I can do that by allowing them to be the focal points and not putting a lot of detail in the background. Kind of like what I did with, let's see, I did that somewhat with the mushrooms back there, as I let them be a little lighter so that they stood out more. And let's see, and also in this little drawing I did of the rocks, I like doing this sort of shorthanded scribble in the background, and then allowing the value from darkest to lightest to create this changing contrast. Let's see if and this one here, which I did too, I also did that, where I wanted the leaves in these boxes to stand out, but I do this sort of shorthand where the background of all the leaves becomes this sort of blurry change in direction. And I actually had a deck that I was using as sort of a solid linear thing. And because you can also journal while you're doing this, I encourage you to have another notebook along, so that maybe you'll be inspired to write something about what you're seeing. And I'm going to pull out my little journal, because this little book, I oftentimes will write little poems of what I'm seeing, and or the feeling that I have, particularly at the moment, just so that I can refer back to it. And the last thing I'm going to do is take a picture for reference, because, you know, this is the 21st century and I have an awesome phone that I can do that with. Although it's not going to really look like what I want it to be when it's done. It gives me a reference that is important later on. So, well, I think I'm going to stop for now, because the mosquitoes are beginning to get me, and I'm going to take my picture and my journal entry, and I'm going to continue working on this on my own over the next week. I'll probably end up by putting about 5 or 6 hours in this when it's all said and done. This is my weekly meditation from my art hike that I can refer to. So I hope you all can have a nice afternoon hike somewhere. Take your sketchbook with you and see what you can come up with as a wonderful drawing that you two can be contemplative with the rest of